Fear of what? I'm not scared of the boogeyman. I'm not scared of a lot of things. But what I was scared of and what I was fearful of was rejection. Thank you for joining me here again on Tailgate Chat. A little different scenery today. Sitting in my office. I've been doing some work and wanted to just connect on a different level today versus being on the tailgate. I've been doing some reflecting recently, and being 6 episodes in, I thought this was a good time for us to stop, take a step back, and see what we've covered over the first 5 episodes and kind of give you an idea of where we might be going. So this isn't just a recap. We're resetting the table, right? And if you're new to Tailgate Chat, this is not the normal scenery. And so we're going to just catch everybody up. And for those of you who have been following first, thank you. We're going to just kind of go over everything one more time here and reset the table, as I said. So let's jump right into it. For those of you who've been here, for the first 5 episodes, you may remember, it's been a while since I put it out, but episode number 1 was called Intro to the Tailgate. And I wasn't there really, for anything other than just creating an invitation for a conversation. And that's the whole idea behind being on the tailgate and having the tailgate chat is, just want to have a real and honest discussion. We talked about vulnerability. I told some stories about my vulnerability, and I hope that led to you maybe thinking about some of your own. Talked about, how it felt to expose, and share some of my struggles, my faith, my doubts, and the realization of how enlightening that is, right? It was like taking a weight off, sharing some of that stuff with everybody. And so that was really the foundation of what we were doing, is just in realizing that for me, I wasn't there to try to build an audience. I wasn't there to try to create a podcast. I was really there just sharing some of my trials and tribulations, and serving others and creating a platform for others to, maybe realize, hey, I'm not alone in this struggle. And maybe to say, hey, maybe, this guy wants to open up. Let's open up. Let's talk. That's really kind of what I was going after. And so that was episode number 1. Then we jumped in, very short time after that, we jumped into episode number 2. And with that, we talked about life, and it's not a destination. It's a journey, right? And so, and the other part of that is that it's the long game. It's not a sprint. Finding our purpose, you're not going to find it overnight, and it's one of those things that we have to do some real deep searching to try to figure out what it is, and what God put us here for. What was the purpose that God put us on this planet? Because everybody has a purpose. Everybody has a reason for being here. And the other thing that I talked about in that episode, and it's quite evident by the podcast that I put out, is I am no professional. I'm a one-man shop. I write the copy. I come up with the ideas. The first 2 were kind of scripted, and I wrote that out. Since then, it's just been kind of me freewheeling it. And I'm learning a lot, right? I had no idea how to edit the videos. I had no idea where to post these videos. I had no idea how to do any of that stuff. I'm using a new program here today that I just learned because I thought, wow, this might be interesting. It might be a little something different for everybody, and I wanted to give it a shot. So if it doesn't work, please put in the comments. Please send me an email. Let me know. Just go back to getting on the tailgate. Let's keep this. In the Marine Corps, we had a saying. It was KISS, and for those of you who know it, For those who don't, I'll fill you in. It's called Keep It Simple, Stupid. And maybe that's what I need to do, but I'm trying to change it up a little bit. We talked about the daily movement matters, and it doesn't have to be big. It's just take that baby step. One of the things that after that episode, and I'll get into here in a second, one of the things that as I started creating my own systems like this, I started creating my own SOP. to try to move myself forward, creating consistency when motivation is lacking. And those kind of things, doing something daily, keep it moving. Yeah, that's something that I think is a big key for everybody. If you're struggling, you just got to take a step. You just have to start moving. And when you are aligned with what you're doing, because you are taking those daily steps, that work will start to fuel you. And it doesn't require perfection. As I just said, I spent a long time waiting, trying to make sure I knew how to podcast. I knew how to do this. And not just in this endeavor, in other endeavors that I've done in the past. I always kind of waited, and I was making sure I know everything. Well, one of the things that I've learned in my 52 plus rotations around the sun is that, you just got to get out and do it. And you'll figure it out along the way. And I actually read a post from a guy today on LinkedIn talking about that same thing. 99% of the people who start something will stop because they don't have the consistency, or they don't just take the first step to do it. And the 1% aren't super talented. They just say, the heck with it, and they just go. And you know what? You're going to fail. That was my fear. I will talk about that here in a minute. That the fear of failing always got in my way. And while we're at it, we're just going to jump right into episode number 3. What was holding you back? That was built on an article I wrote on Substack. What's holding you back? And for me, it was fear. The fear of what? I'm not scared of the boogeyman. I'm not scared of a lot of things. But what I was scared of, and what I was fearful of, was rejection. People not wanting what I'm giving. People not wanting what I'm selling. Well, not this, but just in general, when I've owned businesses. I've always had that fear of being told no. Not a great salesman, because the number one thing a good salesman needs to do is understand no, and be able to understand it's not personal, and just move on to the next person, because somebody out there wants what you're selling, right? Or somebody wants what you're giving. There's probably, if 50 people listen to my podcast and 49 of them aren't the ones, and they just move on, that's fine. It's that one person that I'm trying to connect with. Is that you? You're the one I'm trying to connect with, so we can create something together, so that you and I can have these conversations. Fear of failure. That was another one. Failing, falling flat on my face. I know deep down, like in this area right here, that you're going to fail more than you succeed. But you have to keep trying. And once I got past that, and I'm still in it, that's not sugarcoat it. I'm still in it. I still have that fear, and it's taken me. That's why I just decided to do it right here, right now. I've been talking about doing this episode, and I've had notes on it and trying to get ready to go for a couple of weeks now. My original plan was to put this out the week after episode 5. Well, that's been, 3 weeks ago now. So these are ongoing struggles. I'm talking about them. But I still have the fear of rejection. I still have the fear of failure. And a little piece of me, there are days that I know this isn't going to succeed, but there is. I've had some endeavors in my past where I had a fear of success. What if this actually works? And I talked about this in episode 3. Am I the guy? Right? Am I the guy that can keep putting out information? Am I the guy who's going to be able to sit up here and talk to you? And can I keep, bearing my soul out here for people to listen to? I sure hope so. And I sure hope that you're listening, because I'll tell you, when I'm done with each episode, I'm on a high. I feel like a weight has been taken off my shoulders, and I feel like, oh, man, am I glad I did that? And then you wait 3 or 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, and by the time I'm done with all the work of editing the video and editing the audio and posting the audio and posting the video and cutting the shorts and putting the shorts on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and promoting on LinkedIn and doing all, man, at the end of the day, you're like, oh, exhausted, right? And it's not hard work. It's mind work, right? And so at the end, you take a couple of days and then you're like, then by the time I've taken a couple of days, it's like, oh, what if nobody's watching it? Do I want to do another one? And then I have to build myself back up again. I've always been able to start strong. I can start strong, I get that motivation and I go. And then it starts to feel a little real, and then it starts to feel a little real and we start creeping back a little bit. But it doesn't mean we have to stop. I'm working on it. It is a work in progress, trying to keep this momentum and turning it into consistency. That's the thing. Because I know motivation isn't going to make this thing successful. Motivation isn't going to keep me coming in front of this camera and talking to you. But the consistency of doing it will make it more comfortable. And that's what I'm working toward. And I hope that you can take from that and understand that whatever it is you're working on, that you can start to create that consistency in your life for the projects you're working on, the purpose that you're driving toward. And that then you start to see the success. So after that, we went into episode 4, When the Lights Go Out. That was written about Maurice Claret and Jim Tressel and the struggles that Maurice went through and how I was able to make a connection with that show, the Youngstown Boys, that ESPN 30 for 30. And it really, it goes back to, what happens when the role ends? What happens when the title is gone? What happens when structure disappears? That's really when it comes down to, I can really equate this really well into 2 different keys of life. Number 1, when I transitioned out of the military. I was ready to get out, right? So it wasn't like a shock to the system. I had planned it up. I had a job lined up. I had a marriage lined up. And I had an apartment lined up. I fell right into everything. So that transition part wasn't hard. The transition part for me, the hard part in the transition for me, was going from having a structured daily life and from going around having the brothers and sisters, the community, and the camaraderie around me every day, wearing the uniform, carrying the title of Marine, and knowing that every day what I'm doing matters on a greater scale than for this company's bottom line. That transition was difficult. It wasn't a sudden transition. It wasn't this happened today. That transition slowly appeared and showed itself over the course of about 7 to 8 years. But then there was a time I got laid off. I worked for Nortel. And I got an email on a Monday that said, show up at this building. And I showed up at this building and they had layoff packages for us. We had no idea. It just all of a sudden bomb dropped. That was a little more shocking. When the nonprofit that I ran as executive director, that was a very short timeline. That was a resource issue. We ran out of money, and everything is coming to an abrupt end. That transition. My purpose was not installing fiber optic equipment when I worked at Nortel. That wasn't my purpose. It was a good job, and I loved it, and I really enjoyed what I was doing. But that one really didn't hurt, so to speak, right? When I left Honor, Courage, Commitment, when I left the nonprofit I was working for, that one hurt. That one was a shock. And so this is what I'm talking about. So you can understand whether you're somebody who's going through a military transition, going from being in the armed services to transitioning into civilian life with all of the challenges that comes with, to being somebody who's worked at a company for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and now you're laid off, or now the company shuts down, it goes through bankruptcy, or a myriad of other things happen and you leave. There is a transition and a structural difference for how your life will be moving forward. And you have an identity crisis. Who am I? Right? If you're a senior VP working for, company X, and now you're gone and that whole thing has disappeared, who are you now? If you're like I said earlier, I'm a Marine. Well, now, once a Marine, always a Marine, right? So, but it's different, right? And so you have to understand your purpose equals your role, and for some people, and when that role collapses, when that role ends, if your purpose is your role, it all falls down when that role ends. Now, for a lot of people, you can be working for that company for 30 years, but you have something outside of work that drives you every day, whether it's an organization that you volunteer for or something else that you do in your life. And the role ends and you transition into the past. This is my job, right? But I have my family. I have my whatever it is. There's still some of those things that you have to navigate. And in your purpose, for that second set of individuals, when purpose is deeper than your job, your title, or the season of life you're in, it makes that transition easier. As a young kid, my purpose was being in the military. And so, but as I said, that transition wasn't as hard because I had already mapped out what was coming next. The one that was hardest was because my job at the nonprofit that I was running, that was my purpose, and that was my job. And when the job ended, so did the purpose. And that's when I fell in depression and didn't want to get out of bed in the morning. And it took some time to get past all of that. And so this episode was a little heavier, right? But your purpose has to survive the dark. Your purpose has to be bigger. And it took me some time. I thought it was gone. But as I did my reflection, which I talked about in I think it was episode 2, when I reflected back over the course of my life, I realized I was serving when I was in the military. I founded 3 nonprofits and then ran another one. My purpose all that time, and I was doing those things because I was serving others. And so this fits right into that as well, because I'm still serving. Episode number 5 was motivation versus consistency, which we've kind of already touched on here. Motivation is a feeling, but consistency is a decision. Motivation is something that's emotional. It's something that can give you that, that kick in the can, that fire, under your rear end that gets you going, right? But at some point that flame dies out. Then what? That's where the systems I talked about building coming into place, creating consistency so that when the motivation does die out, you've got a repeatable system that you can turn back to, an SOP that you can jump into that keeps you moving forward. Because at the end of the day, the motivation will win the battle, but the consistency wins the war. And that's what we're striving for. We're striving. You may win a battle, you may lose a battle, and that's okay. That's okay. But consistency is what's going to get you there. And you have to do that. One of the things that I do, and I want to be completely honest with you, I told you in episode 5, I put it down, I'm writing 500 words every morning. Well, I did, and I do, but not every morning. And that's something that I have to get better at. But it does help to create the consistency, to sit down on my computer and to write about anything. And that's one of the things I have a problem with, is figuring out what am I going to write about. I'll sit here now and I'll look at the computer and I'll be like, well, the sun was shining yesterday morning. Sometimes it's kind of tough. But creating something that is moving you forward, whether it's, the first thing I'm going to do every morning is I'm going to read a devotional. The first thing I'm going to do every morning is I'm going to read a chapter in the Bible or in the book that I'm reading. First thing I'm going to do every morning is, before I check my emails, is I'm going to, whatever it may be, I'm going to check in with my team. I'm going to text my son. I'm going to call my daughter before the day gets started. Something that creates a pattern every day that once you do it, you can start building on it. And it's non-negotiable to build identity. The truth is you won't always feel like it. I mean, let's be honest. And I do that. And I just said that. There are days that I don't feel like writing 500 words. And I still, and there are days that I don't feel like it, and I don't do it. Now, there are some days when there's just too much on the plate, and we got to get up and get going and get the day started, or whatever it may be. But there are days that I just am like, what am I going to, I don't want to write, but I do it. You need to just figure out those things, and you need to create the consistency so that you do it anyway. The key line here that I'm going to share with you is, you don't rise to the motivation, you fall to your systems. The motivation will get you started. The motivation will get you going. But you need to create the systems and put those in place, because the motivation will die out. But if you have those systems in place, it'll keep you moving forward. Now, it's more of a dedication than it is a motivation. And you got to be dedicated to what you're trying to achieve. So what we've done here over the first 5 episodes is, episode 1 was, it was an invitation for us to connect. The second one was really just given a direction. The third one we created when we showed some resistance. Fourth one we created an identity, and the fifth one we created discipline. So we're creating a foundation that everything else is going to build on. And I hope that you're feeling this way, and I hope that this is something that you as well are able to kind of grasp onto and feel that, hey, I never thought about it that way. And at the end of the day, we're going to keep moving forward, and we're going to keep doing these podcasts, and we're going to keep having a conversation, because it's not about quick fixes. We've already discussed that. This isn't about fixing something quick. I'm going to show you what I've been through, and I'm going to show you who I'm becoming, and I'm going to show you how I am handling fear, and that I show up daily. This is really more of me being accountable to you. And so I'm trying to set an example, and I really appreciate that you have joined me so far on this journey. And I hope when we hit episode 10, episode 20, episode 50, and further on down the road, you're still there with me, and that you're still, joining in, and I'm hoping, we can get some back and forth. So I really appreciate it. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your time. As I've said in every one of these, we're going to take a minute, and we're just going to give thanks, and we're going to say a quick prayer. So if you'll join me here. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us to connect today. Thank you for the path that you have shown me, and the path that I'm hoping you are showing others to the purpose that you have given them. Please be with the ones that are struggling today. Be with the ones that are trying to, use motivation, create consistency, show them the path, show them the direction, and help them as they move on down the road to your path and your purpose. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Now that we've got this foundation set, it's time that we start building on it. And those episodes will start coming next, and we're going to get into it further down the road. So let's, real quick, give us a share, give us a like. If you're new, watch one of the other episodes that we're going to put up on the screen, and join us as we go down this path for and toward finding our purpose. I really appreciate you, and until next time, we're going to see you right here on the Tailgate, where we're fueling your passion and driving your purpose. Let's get after it.